St. Lucia, this is Open Mic, and we're now back to the second segment of our program. And the second segment of the program will deal with the impacts report.
Looking at what has happened, and I know that a lot of people in St. Lucia, based on the pronouncements by Dr. Kenny Anthony, continue to indicate that impacts has something to do with the United Workers' Party. There are two distinct things that happen. One of them is the investigation, or the impacts investigation as we call it. The other is Operation Restore Confidence. Operation Restore Confidence happened under the reign of the United Workers' Party. The issues surrounding impacts is the baby of Dr. Kenny Anthony. And he can spin it, he can turn it, he can twist it. He created impacts. And it is him to deal with what he created, because he was the one who made the pronouncements. He was the one who spoke about his hit list. I was in cabinet. I never knew that the police came to cabinet and discussed a hit list. I was not privy to any such information. I don't know that the police takes directives from the Prime Minister. The Commissioner of Police is protected under the Constitution, and he has a right to carry out the various operations based on his office. It is the Labour Party government who continues to interfere in the operations of the police. Take, for example, what the minister said recently, that he had called the police and instructed the police to do certain things. The Minister of Commerce, in the Lombards matter, had called the police to complain about the treatment of people at her office. She had raised objections. Since when it is the role of the executive of government to direct the judiciary? Now, take what has happened with the impacts report and the handling of the report, for example. The report was commissioned by the government, the cabinet. It was handed to the Prime Minister. And that's why I said we have the making of a dictator. And it is facilitated by the members who sit in the cabinet with the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister said at a meeting that he instructed his cabinet people not to say a word. And as Rick would say, not a word, not a word, not a word. Any of the ministers. So here we have people elected by the people of their constituencies to represent them. But the Prime Minister gives them an instruction to shut their mouths, every one of them. And up to a day like today, not one of them have been able to speak a word on what is happening, whether it is right, whether it is wrong. So the Prime Minister says, don't speak on the matter. But he himself, a lawyer by profession, as he said, he was a lecturer at the University of the West Indies. And I assume, based on what the Honorable Lon Theophilus said in Parliament, he was a good instructor in law. Because when he instructed him, he said he learned well. He said, apparently, I didn't learn anything. I didn't go to law school. But I know that if they are so bright as lawyers, as they claim to be, they would know how not to contaminate investigation and evidence. And it is clear to me that what was done was not done out of ignorance. It was done in a manner that called into question everything. How can the evidence of a case be in Jamaica? How can the DPP, who is to investigate a case, have to write to the Minister of Security to get the evidence. The DPP's office is supposed to be involved in the investigations so that they can guide the investigation along based on the laws of St. Lucia to be able to use the evidence. And how can the Prime Minister go and read extracts of a report that is to be used as evidence that would already prejudice the thinking? So if I was one of the police officers in Operation Restore Confidence, how can you challenge me in court when the Prime Minister has already influenced the slant of thinking in relation to this investigation? I mean, we watch international news, and there are some cases that cannot even be held in the jurisdiction where the crime took place because of the prejudice that may be associated, because of broadcasts on the media. You telling me the Prime Minister, a lawyer by profession, did not understand that he could not come and read? But you see, what the Prime Minister was doing was trying to do political damage to the previous administration, not realizing that he, Dr. Anthony, had been the one doing all the damage to the reputation of St. Lucia. And Impax is in his shoes. It is in his pocket. It is in his briefcase. It is in his jacket. And he had better deal with it to try and get St. Lucia out of the mess that he, Dr. Anthony, has created with that Impax report.
Now, that having been said about the Impax report, I now want to touch on a sensitive issue, and that is a situation of vision. For any business or country to survive, there must be a vision. And I'm going to highlight two incidents, two St. Lucians. First, let us take Club Med. When I was in charge of the National Development, chairman of the National Development Corporation, Club Med had closed its doors. And a deal was made, or should I say, I call it a deal, nothing bad about that, where they would pay 50% of all the wages for the period during which it was closed. I'm not the Prime Minister. I merely advised Dr. Kenny Anthony. Through my connections, I informed Dr. Anthony that Club Med would not be opening its doors and that we should take the necessary action to have the place replaced. Quite correctly, Dr. Anthony, with caution, said to me, Michael, we have to be careful because this is a French organization. We have a good relationship with the French, even though the terms of the contract said that it's not operating after 6 months, we can terminate the lease. I went along with it because, as I've said before, a Prime Minister is a Prime Minister. He has the authority, he has the power, he's been put there by the people. One cannot dispute that. However, at intervals, I gave him a gentle reminder at what I had heard, that Club Med would not reopen. Lo and behold, after 2 years, the Prime Minister asked me to get hold of the manager of NDC, and the three of us traveled to Miami to meet with Club Med. The meeting lasted 5 minutes, St. Lucia, because Dr. Anthony may have his faults. He's certainly not a fool. When he went into the office and he looked around and he posed the question, when are you opening? And all the directors said, they're not opening. And he said there was no need for a meeting. We left the premises of Club Med in Miami. We went to our hotel. And I don't know if Dr. Canty recalls, he said, Michael, do what you have to do. That very night, I traveled to Montego Bay. And I met Mr. Carl Hendrickson. And I told him I would like him to come to St. Lucia. He said, that's not on my agenda. I thank you for the offer. I cannot come. I went on bended knees. On bended knees. I said, if you're not going to come for St. Lucia, at least for my sake, as chairman of NDC, you would help me if we can get that investment going. To make a long story short, the gentleman finally came to St. Lucia. He took one look at it and said, I'm not interested. I again persuaded and I begged and I persuaded. Eventually, he decided to invest down here. And it's a pity that I don't have the pictures today to show St. Lucia the condition of Club Med when he went down there. And it took almost a year, and he transformed that place. And today, a 250 hotel is in full swing. And when I come back, in the third segment of my program, I will give you some more details. This is Open Mic.